Hello, Krzysztof. Thank you so much for having me. I know we were supposed to have this chat already a while back, but obviously a lot of things have happened. But now even more things have happened. So I think like it's a good timing to catch up with Reanimated 2 now in alpha. I wouldn't want to talk to anyone else than you. I'm so excited to have you on the channel.
Yeah, apparently the pandemic stopped us from meeting at the App.js conference. We were supposed to to meet there and hopefully do the recording before that. But yeah, here we are with some new stuff published recently, and there are more topics to discuss, I believe.
Yeah. And so App.js was cancelled, obviously. Do you plan on doing a new edition next year? Was it very difficult to deal with the pandemic and the conference organization?
No, we managed to get around most of the bookings that we already have, and yeah, apparently we had to cancel the conference, and also obviously didn't like that, and I'm sure that most of the people who already made plans didn't like this as well. But of course, we didn't have any choice. But we're hopeful that we can make it next year. So already starting some initial plans, but we will see how the worldwide situation evolves over the next couple of months, and we're still hoping to do that. But what we instead launched instead of the conference is our new Software Mention Academy, which is like a series of webinars and workshops that we do, and we also get people who were supposed to do the talks at the conference to present during the webinars. So this is a good opportunity to learn about React Native, but also other things. And we just recently had a webinar on Reanimated, and hopefully we'll be also showing more content.
So you are a director of engineering at Software Mention, co-creator of React Native on Android. You're the father of React Native Gesture Handler, React Native Reanimated. Can you tell us a little bit more about Software Mention and the relationship with the React Native technology?
Yeah, so Software Mention's been founded like over 7 years ago. We started that with a couple of friends. Then I left to work at Facebook, where, among other things, I also been a part of the React Native team from like around the time where the React Native for Android product started. So was on the core team since the beginning of React Native for Android, and then left Facebook, come back to move back to Poland and rejoin Software Mention, and currently we're at 85 people, and yeah, we basically do software development and consulting services for different clients. And since I sort of brought React Native very early, we specialize in that to some extent. So like a large amount of people here been doing React Native for like 3 or 4 years even, so have a plenty of expertise, and we work with many companies. We work on open source projects, including Reanimated, Gesture Handler, React Native Screens. We are also one of the biggest contributors to Expo. So we work on Expo, and large part of the Expo team is based at Software Mention. So yeah, that's a gist of it.
What's the relationship between Software Mention and Expo? You guys seem to collaborate very closely together. How did that come about?
Yeah, it actually started since the early days of React Native. Like folks from Expo been like really active since the public announcement of React Native. They also started adapting React Native very early, as soon as it went out. So we get to know each other through that while I was still at Facebook. And then when I left, we decided that there are opportunities to work on things that are difficult for people in the community, whereas like Facebook was sort of more focusing on getting the adoption internally within like the main app or other apps that they have. So they were focusing on sort of different problems than people in community had at that moment. And there was an opportunity for us to work together, and that's how it all started.
So last month, I mean, we were all in lockdown, and you brought us Christmas essentially with a first look at Reanimated 2. And what I took away from the original announcement you've made, but you tell me also, maybe, you know, if that's correct, is that really with Reanimated 1, you looked at the main constraint of building gestures and animations in React Native, and then found a really elegant workaround on how we can declaratively build these gestures and animations. In Reanimated 2, you seem to have done the other way around, like starting how it would look like if there were no constraint in writing gestures and animations, and then work up a solution from the end result. Is that a correct assumption, or?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, more or less, yes. I mean, we've been struggling with Reanimated adoption, and like the biggest difficulty for people was to learn it. Obviously, thanks to your video, this became a possibility for many people. They were able essentially to learn, like starting from like very basics to building like amazing, very difficult and complex animations and gesture-based interactions. So, but it was still a struggle. Like it was, like around a year ago, we started like thinking that we actually have a little bit of capacity to work on Reanimated, and like how we envision this work to happen, and then we started thinking about some problems in Reanimated that people have, and obviously there were some issues with like initialization time. There were issues with the bridge traffic that was in some cases very big, and in general problems with, and that people would just like sort of traps that people can easily fall in when they would like recreate a lot of items, a lot of nodes during re-renders, and that would cause additional and large amount of traffic through the bridge. And we started like thinking about solutions, and sort of had a couple of ideas. Around a year ago, I think we landed procedural nodes, which were supposed to address the problem of reusing similar like structures of nodes, so that when you have the same interaction that you want to use on a list items, for example, then you could do that easily without having those nodes recreated for every single item on the list. And then we also started looking into ways how we can utilize turbo modules and JSI to get rid of the bridge traffic, but it just didn't result in, we just didn't have like a very promising result out of our first attempts, and decided to discontinue that, and then sort of started thinking like how we can do it differently, because we still haven't had a solution to that problem, that it was just very difficult for people to learn the framework. And then then the idea that we got was like, why can we make it so that people can just write it in JavaScript? But for that to be possible, we had to figure out a way to run JavaScript on the UI thread, and that's how the Worklets concept came to life, sort of. And once we had Worklets, then which is like one of the building blocks for Reanimated, but Worklets are basically like just an abstraction that allows you to execute JavaScript on a different thread. It doesn't necessarily need to be UI thread. I mean, in our case, it is, and the Worklets implementation is constrained to run it on UI, but in theory, it doesn't need to be.
So do you have a team dedicated at Software Mansion who's working on Reanimated 2? And is there also part of the team working on maintaining Reanimated 1? How is it organized?
So one of the greatest things about building software in open is that you sometimes get help from other people and other companies. And in this particular case, we've been contacted by Shopify in December with a proposition that we should do something together in open source, and then that was the idea that we had, that we wanted to build for a while, and we decided to work with Shopify on that. And thanks to Shopify, we managed to build a team of 3 people, as I mentioned. So we have including myself, 2 other folks, Shimon and Carol, who are main sort of engineers behind Reanimated 2, and are also now maintainers of the new version.
In Reanimated 1, so there were performance issues, as you mentioned, with initialization time, and also you had to take care of non-memoization, because we were creating these crazy gestures and animations, which were having tons of animation nodes. And the main difficulty with the learning curve was that we had these 2 words. We had the imperative JavaScript word, the JavaScript thread word, and we had the declarative word, so where we were declaring our gestures and animations. But you're right, everything was coexisting in the same file, kind of, and you really had to develop a mindset of how to separate these 2 things when writing code. And I think that was very challenging. It is still very challenging to this day, and it's easy to get confused when you write code, what is executed when, and so on. What do you feel I feel like, so Reanimated 2 is simplifying this dramatically, because now you just write JavaScript, but because now it looks, these 2 words, the word of Worklets running on the UI thread and the React code running on the JavaScript thread, because they look now so close together and they have like such interesting ways to communicate with each other, I feel sometimes we can get tricked into thinking that it's all the same thing. And I've, for instance, caught myself a lot writing a Worklet code and invoking innocently a function, maybe process color from React Native, and then forgetting that these are executed asynchronously because this is part of the main JavaScript thread. Do you feel like it might be now the main difficulty when people are gonna use Reanimated 2?
That was definitely a consideration. We're thinking about, I mean, the library is still in alpha, and we don't have like a concrete plans on changing the APIs, but we are thinking of like making some improvements here and there, and specifically for the case that you mentioned, when you accidentally call a method, and because it's a method that is defined in JavaScript, it doesn't call synchronously. I do believe that in this particular case, we should actually solve it differently. We shouldn't really allow for that, because as you said, it may be confusing to people, like especially if this is like a method that you import from some library, and you may not really know if it's a workload or not in some cases, because like in the long term, I can foresee like people creating libraries that will already have worklets that you can reuse inside of your own worklets. So when you import them, you don't really know if it's workload or not, which means that we should definitely have like some sort of checks, whether in build time or in the runtime. Ultimately the goal was to make the communication seamless, so you shouldn't really be paying a lot of attention like what you can pass and whatnot. The penalty here is that it may just get out of control if you forget about some constraint, and the cases that we consider where this can be problematic, we think that we can provide like a proper error messaging, or just structure the API in better ways to prevent from falling into the traps like that. And we'll be making changes just in the next couple of releases. So hopefully this will straighten up. If you have any feedback as of that, then definitely reach out. and we'll be happy to also look into ways how we can improve the API to make it more intuitive.
No, you're right. The communication is really seamless, but it's actually so seamless that sometimes, like, for some use cases, you forget. It's interesting. I was wondering. I'm not sure how feasible it is, but if we could build like a ESLint plugin that could detect maybe some of these. Because I know now with TypeScript and ESLint, you can have like type information within ESLint. I'm not sure how. But for sure, already like a proper error message would be amazing. But
yeah, one of the elements of our Reanimated infrastructure is a plugin that we have for Babel, because we need to transform the functions that are marked as worklets, so that we can run them on a different thread. And since we have this plugin, we've been thinking of like adding also some build time checks into that plugin. So it doesn't necessarily need to be ESLint, because if we add it to ESLint, then like some people may choose not to run linting on their code. And when it's a part of a plugin, then whenever you use Reanimated, this will actually run through your code. So we can do checking there and like throw you a build errors.
I've played with the latest alpha version, which now supports type annotations on Worklets, and someone from the community also contributed the TypeScript typings for Reanimated 2, which I've tested quite a lot, and they work very well now. And it's really the TypeScript support now is really amazing, and it's kind of cool that you can really type your Worklets completely and have the new Reanimated hooks, which are also like properly typed. It's kind of cool. And in both Reanimated 2 and Reanimated 1, I find the API design to be always so clever and so elegant, because in Reanimated 1, you guys really found what are the smallest primitives we need to provide in order to build all these complex functionalities. So for instance, the concept of clock, which so the whole Reanimated 1 API was so elegant. And I feel like you guys did also an incredible job with Reanimated 2, where you have some concepts which are used internally, and then you really asked which are the primitives and what is the right level of primitives we need to expose to the developer. How do you guys go about designing these APIs? Because you always do such an amazing job providing the right API.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's mainly like the approach that we took with Reanimated 2 is that we have a small group of like testers, or even before we publish alpha, we already have a few people like writing those interactions, and those decisions were mainly driven by feedback from those people. So William was there on the group, and it was a great experience to have like a small group of people who are like really active, and they also know a lot about animations, and they also have plenty of use cases to run through them, those ideas that we had. And as you mentioned, like Reanimated 2 also has this like sort of lower layer of API that is not fully exposed through the APIs. And on top of that layer, we built something that we wanted to expose. And it's like the parts that you can see are like basically the things that we figured are needed for those particular use cases. But it's not like those are all. It's not like the API is complete still, because we still have a few use cases that we don't have a good enough way to cover using the current API, which essentially means that we'll be adding more methods to the API, or like some new ways of doing things in the near future, because we want to really cover all the use cases. And the way I look at it, when like people ask me when Reanimated 2 leaves alpha, and the answer is like when I can be sure that like any random person can install the library and use it for their use case without us needing to like expand the API. And we're at this phase that like we publish it as an alpha to the public, and this made a essentially this way getting much more people to use it, to try it, and we now have like plenty more feedback than we had before the launch. So we're incorporating that still, and hopefully can be sure like very soon that the API covers many of the use cases. Like we shouldn't really aim like 200% of use cases, because I don't think it's possible, but like say 99% should be covered.
Yeah, people. So it's obviously, I guess, a question you have a lot. People are always asking me, because it's so exciting. You guys came out with this new version, which I mean simplifies dramatically the whole game, but enables also new use cases which were not possible. And you came out also with great examples already implemented. And so people are asking, can we use it already, because it looks ready, right? What's your answer when people ask you this question?
Yeah, so this is something that I sort of addressed in the previous question, but like the way I look at it is that we need to be sure that like anyone can install the library and they can use it for what they want to, without like having any issues. There's still like some issues being reported. Some are pretty popular, and those are the ones that we're looking more into. There's still a few rough edges when it comes to installation process, which are connected to like the way turbo modules work at the moment. So there's like a lot of boilerplate code that you need to add to your project, especially on iOS. This isn't really like very convenient, and we plan on like looking into that a little bit more. Like maybe there are ways for us to like provide some helpers to get around those problems. But I'm sure that like as JSI and turbo modules become more popular, those are kind of problems that needs to be solved for other libraries that would adapt to JSI as well. So those are sort of common problem that I think would be more appropriate to be solved on React Native Core versus in Reanimated in particular. So changing that in the core would just like it's just like a bigger effort, both for us and for the core maintainers who need to approve our changes or we need to consolidate with them. So yeah, still there's still some time that we need to stabilize the API. One of the things that we are also prioritizing is support in Expo, because in the managed workflow, obviously, because this will actually like also bump the user base very quickly, and will also make it much easier for people to use, and we can actually do that even without simplifying installation process, because if we embed that to Expo, then like most people would for most of the people, this will be like no effort to start using new Reanimated.
Do you think it could happen for SDK 39 or more like SDK 40? Or
I can really tell for for the Expo team. We'll be aiming next SDK, yes. Wow. But there are a few things that few requirements, and specifically around turbo modules support that will need to happen. But we still believe it's possible. It's 39 is perhaps like a few months far from now still. So there's some time that we have. We just need to get a few people to look into this, and also at Expo there are many other priorities. So we'll see how the things goes. But we've seen an interest from the community to get Reanimated to run on Expo, so that would hopefully also bump the priority on that particular feature.
Cool. Yeah, that's super exciting. I I was thinking about the way Reanimated 2 changes the mental model when writing gestures and animation. So we talked about it used to be declarative, imperative, and now it's UI GS UI thread and the React JavaScript thread and the communication between the two. I writing a few animations with Reanimated 2. Another also mental shift that needs to happen, I feel like, is also the relationship with side effects. So in Reanimated 1, we were writing these big blocks of animation nodes, and they were executed sequentially, and we were doing all sorts of side effects, said this, said that, and then boom, boom, boom. In Reanimated 2, it seems to be a bit different, where you tell me if I'm wrong, but so far there are two kinds of side effects. So side effects come from gestures or from animations, which are first-class citizen in Reanimated 2. And you have really now to orchestrate these two sources of side effect, and then all the computation you derive from these side effects nicely. And you cannot insert side effects anywhere in your worklets hooks and so on. Is that a correct assumption? And can you maybe talk a little bit more about it? Or
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely one. Well, I would call it simplification in the API, but it also limits the possibilities to some extent. It's definitely one of those things, as I discussed earlier, one of the places where the API is not sufficient for some use cases. So I know about a few use cases where we're like doing updates to like existing values, not necessarily through the gestures are needed, and this is something people need. And yeah, it's definitely something that we'll be looking into very soon. We just need to like collect a bigger number of those use cases to really be able to figure out like what's the best approach could be for this case. So we definitely can help in that, and yeah, let's work together on getting those use cases and figuring out like what the best approach would be. But on the other side, there's this constraint where we're trying to make the execution predictable. So, like for example, one way of doing side effects is like you essentially can assign update values in the use animated style hook, and I think that's what actually you're doing in some of the videos you posted on YouTube already. But this is like, to me, this is not the ideal approach. I like to think about the use animated style hook the same way as you think about render in React Native. So like when you think about render, would you be updating state in render method? Perhaps not. And this is almost the same like analogy to me, because use animated style, it is a sort of reactive hook. It runs whenever the input changes, and if you're also updating input in it kind of create a cycle that we need to sort of figure out how to support best in these cases. So we I haven't found I don't have a solution in my mind just yet, and we'll be thinking about it a little bit more. There are definitely like many different approaches, and this is also one of the things that we can easily check in runtime or in the build time, whether you're actually doing this kind of stuff. So there are many options, and yeah, let's work together on getting that resolved.
yeah, I find it super exciting, exactly like you said, because I came in with Reanimated 1 thinking, so I wrote the recipes which I knew how to write. And then obviously, because I had these side effects a little bit everywhere, it was not working very well. And by cleaning up these side effects and really having like you said, you wouldn't put a set state into a render, then it triggered a cascade of cleanup in my gestures and animations, and suddenly you remove one crazy side effect and you clean it up, and then that triggers the next cleanup, and at the end, when you really developed a nice mental model for side effects, like you would do in React with render and state and so on, then you can write really, really clean gestures and animations. So it has been my experience. So I think, but it's very nice when you have like a nice mental model for building these gestures and animations and the side effects. So Reanimated 2 is obviously this dramatic improvement for writing gestures and animations, but it also enables a lot of use cases which were not possible before. So for instance, one example I have in mind is that I wrote this chart user interactions where we can format the date and time of each value when you move around the chart, and you can use the local formatting from JavaScript, which you couldn't do before. I'm sure there are a lot of also other new use cases I'm not thinking about that you can implement. And also now people are talking about, it's just a new thread we can use to do other things which could be potentially also unrelated with gestures and animations. So are you guys thinking also about these new possibilities which are enabled by Reanimated 2?
Yeah, definitely. Like that was one of the first idea we also started thinking of when we did our first experiments with running JS on UI thread. And we kind of were thinking at the beginning that we would just build like a generic abstraction for running JS on any thread almost, so that you can do things like data processing, like parsing network responses, or like processing audio or video even on like a separate thread. But then we thought that this might actually like shift the focus from our main goal, and we wanted to get Reanimated as soon as possible. And there are a couple of things that are specific to the UI thread that are not really existing in other threads, like for example the refresh rate synchronization. So you actually want the code to be synced to the screen updates, which is not necessarily the case in other threads, because when you have like just a background thread, it doesn't matter when you run the code. So you actually run it as soon as you can, and you don't need to wait for vsync. So there are a couple of things that are specific to the UI, and we kind of embed that into the current Worklet implementation. But yeah, hopefully we'll have some time also to extract it and make like a separate package that would allow you to really run, or like spawn a separate thread and do some execution or processing there.
That's super exciting. I was wondering if you have any advice for React Native developers in general, people who are choosing React Native as a technology for their project, and what advice would you give developers when building projects with React Native?
What advice? Well, I think with like, just kind of similar with any new technologies, is to be keeping up to date with new things that are happening. Like a year ago, some of the things that are now possible in React Native just wouldn't be possible or wouldn't be performant enough. And those things are like really rapidly changing. There's a core team that is doing plenty of work. Like the team is now very big, and they're making changes every day, and like even like huge changes. And there is a new architecture coming up in React Native also. So keeping up with the news and updates to the libraries is going to be important. So be active in community. I think that would be my advice. And also see if you can give back, like by submitting a good quality issues, for example. It's really something that helps library maintainers they're giving heart and their work to the community, and the best what you can do is to make your issues when you're creating them, make them like self-explanatory and when well explained. So start with that. If you're thinking of open sourcing some of that of your work, then that's also a great idea. So be active in community. That would be my advice.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time today. Can you tell people where they can find more about Reanimated 2 and find you on social media, maybe?
So I'm on Twitter. My handle is KZZZF. It's like 3 Z's in it. And I think you should, for Reanimated news, check my profile either or Software Mention. It's SW Mention on Twitter. And also follow our updates on Software Mention Academy and on App.js. So hopefully we can have the conference next year. And for Reanimated, we just check the GitHub page. We, along with the new version, we publish in updated documentation. There's plenty of information there already. And you should also follow William on YouTube because he's posting great content on Reanimated.
Perfect. Krzysztof, thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
For you.